Good evening. Welcome to Lead Library. I am Clay T. White, the director of the Oral History Research Center here in the library. Lead is operated under Dean Patty Iannuzzi. We're here in your library. We're really open to the public. Patty could not be with us tonight. She regrets that. Tonight's program is brought to you by a department here in the library called Special Collections. The director is Michelle Light. If you don't know Michelle, she's the one in the elegant pantsuit sitting over here. So Michelle Light operates Special Collections that is tasked with collecting the history of Southern Nevada. Michelle does that with a staff of historians, curators, a photographer, archivists, technicians of all kinds, and a digital department managed by Corey Lampert. All of us collect documents, oral histories, photographs, maps, manuscript materials that are preserved and made available to our students and to researchers from all over the world. Tonight's event serves a threefold purpose: to introduce a new collecting initiative called Building Las Vegas, to kick off a series of summer panel discussions for that Building Las Vegas initiative, and to showcase the collaboration between my colleague Dave Schwartz, his Center for Gaming Research, and the Cass Business School, City University of London. The Building Las Vegas endeavor is designed to collect, process, and preserve materials about the built city of Las Vegas and the surrounding area, so really Southern Nevada. Our project coordinator is Stephanie Evans. Our collecting areas include master plan communities, neighborhoods, transportation, water management, architecture, and just many, many others. We seek donations of personal and corporate archives as historic evidence of our built environment. So I want you to grab one of our spanking brand new brochures on the back and see how you can help us with this initiative. When you leave tonight, you're going to have that feeling of intellectual excitement. Know that on first Thursdays, beginning in July, August, and September, you can be exposed to and participate in other discussions just like this one that will be held at the downtown 5th Street School. These panel discussions will be co-sponsored by Special Collections, the AIA, Institute of Architects, and Steve Clark's Downtown Design Center. So tonight, I thank and introduce Dave Schwartz, whose 7-year relationship with the Cass School presents emotional architecture and hospitality design. Dave is a UCLA PhD, author of many, many, many books, historian, professor, and director of Special Collections Center for Gaming Research. Dave.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Clay T. That was great. That was great. Thank you, Michelle, Peter, everybody, Aaron, everybody with Special Collections, Stephanie. And thank you to all of you for being here to hear what we're going to have to say. And, of course, our panel, which I'll introduce in a moment. Before we do, I just want to throw my 2 cents in, and then I'll butt out. But as I was driving here, something occurred to me. Emotion is critical to casinos, but it has an application way beyond casinos. Think of it this way. Nobody has to gamble, do they? Do you have to do it? Think about this. And yet people do. And yet we're turning people away some nights here. You guys have heard of the unicorn frappuccino, right? Does anybody need a unicorn frappuccino? 2 weeks ago, do we know that such a thing existed? And yet, they can't keep the supplies in stock. They're selling out of them so quickly. Why? Emotion. We are going to hear from some panelists who were instrumental in the creation of the Las Vegas Strip as a place where emotion reigns supreme and dictates much of the consumer behavior. So I'm going to introduce our panelists, starting to your left and going right. We'll start off with Leonard Bergman, who's the CEO of Bergman, Walls and Associates, who have done incredible work in the casino field. When you're on the Strip, cast students this week, you will see some of their work at Caesar's Palace, Paris, and Link. Okay. Next up is Alec Woogmaster, who is the creative director of interiors for Wynn Design and Development. You will see his work at Wynn and Encore. That work, if you've seen it, needs no introduction. Next, we have John Akers, and you will not see a single brick that he's built unless he's moonlighting, but you will find his presence everywhere in the Strip, because this is the man who generated player tracking and bonusing and so much other stuff that really determines how casinos run. So his influence is everywhere. Next up, we have Ethan Nelson, who's the president of Steelman Partners, who have done a lot of work in Asia and have done a lot of work around the United States. And here, close to home in the Strip, you'll see some of their work at the Stratosphere, Treasure Island, and MGM Grand. And last, but certainly not least, we have Don Brinkerhoff, whose work is often the first thing that you see as you're coming. And literally, it may be the first thing that you see as you go out on the Strip, because his company, his firm, and he were responsible for redesigning the streetscape of the Strip itself and gave it its present character. Also, he's done work, and I was joking with him before, it will be easier for me to list the hotels that he hasn't done than the hotels that he has done. But some of the real standout ones that you'll notice are the Bellagio, Venetian, Wynn, and Mirage. So let's get the conversation started with a little talk about history. And our panelists are going to be reminiscing and talking amongst each other and interjecting a little bit. The modern Las Vegas Strip, you could argue, started with Caesar's Palace and reached its fruition with the Mirage and has continued since then. Can you talk about the influence of those two projects on the Strip and emotion? Oh.
Take that one. Yes, I started working with Steve Wynn and what was the Golden Nugget Company, and later changed the name to the Mirage, in 1968. And I got a call, actually from a friend, saying you're going to get a call from the Golden Nugget people, and they want to talk to you. And I went over and I met with Leonard's dad, Joel, and associate people from the Golden Nugget Company. And I had been cornered by a fellow from South Africa, whose name I can't... Saul Kerzner, because he had come to visit a friend in California, and he went out to this project we had done in Palm Springs area, and we had done lakes and streams and waterfalls, and he would say, well, that's going to work for my casino back in South Africa. And Julie called me, and this is my daughter Julie, by the way. Julie called and said, we got an appointment this afternoon. It was a Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel, and from this guy from South Africa. And I said, this is a waste of time. It's another, wild goose chase. Oh, and she said, no, you got to speak with him. So we go down and we hang out in the hallway opposite his room, and he knock and nobody answers. And I said, Julie, see what I told you? Just about that time, an associate of his, Monty Wolpe, came walking up and said, Saul will be here in a minute. And Saul showed up, and I gave him my, sales pitch. And 2 weeks later, I was walking around in Johannesburg, and we went out to work at the Sun City, which was the gambling facility, Because in South Africa at that time, it had homelands for the various tribes. And you couldn't do gaming in South Africa proper, but the tribes were considered independent countries, and so they could do it. So we ended up doing the Cascades Hotel there. That was the first experience I'd had in doing a casino or any other kind of hotel. And so I came back and then working with Joel, who unfortunately passed away this past year. We made the presentation, and he said, "Well, Steve's back in Atlantic City trying to sell his hotel back there, and but he'll be back in a week." And so I came back again, and he said, I'm going to give you some money. Come back in a couple of weeks, show me what you got." And I said, "I don't work that way. We do, sort of brainstorming sessions with our clients and sketches, etc." And he says, "Well, okay, let's schedule that." And we did. And then one of his he had an architectural team, about 3 or 4 guys, 3 of which were supposed to be on this panel, and they didn't make it. Joel had the unfortunate experience of dying. He'd be here. Joel and I are, best pals for the longest time. We worked for Steve for 30 years and are still working for him. And Steve was an interesting man and still is. And he taught me everything I know about what his point of view was. For example, he says, we got to do a great job from the street because people are going to say, it was this nice outside, what it must have been like inside. And so we worked on the Mirage and the volcano and all of that, and then continued on doing it because once you've worked for Steve, you tend to punch your union card, and the other people feel you're going to be okay too. So, and we continued doing things for him, but a lot of other people on the Strip in Las Vegas, and that went on to international work. We've done work in Turkey and in China, and where else? Macau, yeah, on and on and on. I've done somewhere in the vicinity. Julie and I on the plane were trying to add them up. Somewhere like 30 casino hotels around the world. Most of them.
More than that.
That's just Las Vegas. Yeah.
We need a chair for Julie.
Julie is the president of Lifescapes International, and I just sort of hang around. I don't do much anymore. We have a staff of about 40, and we have designers and landscape architects and creative people, and I just sort of deal with all the heavy lifting, and I just sort of contribute as I can.
Dad, Ethan's dying to talk.
Well, he's always dying to talk.
Go ahead, Ethan.
Go ahead, Ethan.
Moderator.
Please.
I love hearing that story of you meeting the great developer, one of your 2 references. For our work, I think those 2 references are spot on as the beginning of, not the Strip, but the beginning of what we're talking about tonight. They're completely apropos. I might throw Bellagio in there too. 1, 2, 3. They are separated obviously by time. But what's exciting for us as we think about all the built work on the Strip is, Caesars does get the program right. It becomes the first great kind of adult playground. But for us, it's the Mirage that gets the scale right. That by getting 3,000 rooms and getting the 1 million square foot podium, that's what really both responds to and fuels the customer demand for it.
So John, once Don has gotten them into the building, what happens on the casino floor?
Well, I think the first, is this working?
Oh, I can hear.
Yeah.
Okay, can you guys hear me? So what happens inside the casino is really no different than what happens outside. We need to frame that. When you talk about Caesars and you talk about Mirage, I think that what you're really talking about is something I'd call aspirational decadence. It's the desire to be important without having to do any work for it. That we're tired. In everyday life, we're out there, we're working, we're trying, and most of us aren't recognized in the way that we think. And we want to escape to some place where that recognition can come true. And Las Vegas is one of those oases. When Caesars was built, when Jay Sarno built it, it was all about being the greatest, most decadent place you could imagine. You've got everything you want there. You've got the booze, you've got the girls, you got the guys, you've got everything. And you got a chance to gamble too. And when we look at this and we see what Steve did, was Steve brought scale to the thing. He scaled it and kept the elegance of it, I would say. He kept the personality, but it's really important as we talk about all of this, whether it's the landscape, the buildings, the interiors, or the games, that the most important element of our Las Vegas experience is what occurs between the visitor's ears. How do they feel? How do they go home feeling? Do they have a sensation that makes them want to come back? If they do, it doesn't matter whether that came from the games or the buildings, we've succeeded.
Alex, can you talk a little bit about how Wynn is still working in this?
Well, actually, I wanted to start by saying, kind of tagging onto what you were saying, I think that one of the things that started with Caesars and then Mirage and has kind of been continuing onward from that is I think older casinos didn't immediately provide guests with a sense of achieving that aspiration. And what Caesars and Mirage and what we try to do also at Wynn and many other properties still on the Strip is the second you walk in the door or even that you see the door, you've already kind of achieved that aspiration that you're looking for. You already feel wealthy, powerful, sexy, whatever it is in various environments. And so we personally, we try to propel that basically. We feel that guests will be encouraged to stay longer, to spend more, to play more if they feel comfortable, elevated, important, and capable of achieving more than they're used to. And I think that being in environments that already give you that help.
Good. Leonard, what do you feel?
Well, coming back to the original question,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't really need this with all you guys, do I? I have a reputation for having a loud voice, so I'm going to use it. The thing that it started with Caesars and Jay Sarno. He recognized, as all of my colleagues have indicated, that people wanted to feel special when they arrived. He understood that in a way that nobody else did at the time. And thus Caesar's Palace was born. And even after its sale, the new owners, and there have been quite a few of them, and we've actually been lucky enough to work for most of them, but they all recognize this. Caesar's is iconic. When Steve came along, he brought all the parts and pieces together. Caesar's didn't really have all the parts and pieces. It was not an integrated resort at the time. And Steve really created that. He saw this big picture. I don't know, Don, you remember all the stockbrokers said he'd be broke before a year was out? And he
Yes,
paid off the debt in a year.
He said-
because he owned the experience from the moment they came in till the moment they left. They felt
It was
special.
said that, by God, it'd have to do $1 million a year, but it did two.
Yeah, it was a day. It was a day. It was $1 million a day that he had to make his nut, and he did double that. And he paid off all that junk bond debt in a year. And Caesars came in right behind it, and they changed their casino, their experience. If all of you look at the history, you'll see that even the facades have all changed. They've been Romanized. Caesars didn't really look like a Roman edifice when they first built it. It had this unique CMU block called Sarno block that actually there are still a few pieces left. But
A lot of us still miss those.
yeah, actually, they're pretty cool. But what happened is, this was the birth of really of the integrated resort, and then you saw MGM, Harrah's, everybody followed suit, and we had this huge building boom that lasted up until about 2008 or 9, where many of the new places were erected, City Center, Cosmo, and they all addressed the same thing that you spoke about as well, John, right? That people feel special, because anybody that's logical knows they're gonna lose money playing the games, but
Let's go back a second, though. The question really is, as we scaled up this this desire to make people feel special, and we all agree here that Steve Wynn is the master of that. Is that fair?
Absolutely.
absolutely.
When we brought in the corporate managers, specifically, Jim Murray's not here, is he? Specifically Caesars and MGM, I would submit to you they lost the plot, that they scaled without soul, that they scaled for the purpose of being giant cash registers instead of creating that experience between the customer's ears. You disagree?
You know, Steve, I'm sorry.
You go.
Steve said to me and others in the room, you know, when I built the theater at the Treasure Island, I spent $90 million. And he said, that first ticket cost $90 million. And if that first ticket didn't sell, I was in deep trouble. And he said, the difference between me and many of the other fellas is that I'm a showman and they're a corporate manager, and the corporate management is looking for safety. And it says, I'm not into safety, I'm into, you know, extravagance.
So, now my turn. They're both my clients, so I have to be good. However, I think your statement is not without merit, and however, they are moving away from just looking at that bottom line.
Yeah, we're charging for
Recognizing,
parking.
they are. We could have a discussion about that too. But seriously, I mean, City Center started off as really a very modern environment, and they've been slowly morphing all of the venues into something that's more relatable to their guests. I think that they really focused on a certain guest segment that wasn't necessarily broad enough for them to be able to garner the kind of revenues they wanted. And everything's tied together. These casinos are a web. They're not individual venues. So everything counts. I talk about this. That's one of my little sayings. I know Paul has quite a few, and with merit. But the reality is that you own the guests from the moment they arrive, which is very important. Steve recognized that with all of the elements that he created in front of his casinos, and you own them when they leave. So,
But what do you mean by owning? Do you mean that they owe you, or do you mean
You own-
that you've
you own their-
inspired them so much you've got their loyalty?
you own their experience. If you blow it, they're going to the other
Good
place.
enough.
When City Center was opening, I remember seeing a interview with Wynn, and at that time, no one really knew what City Center was going to, what Aria and Vidara and all that was going to be. And I'm going back, 10 years in memory, but the question to Wynn was, is City Center going to be as luxurious as Wynn's other properties? And I remember him saying, it's not even the target. And I think that's what you're saying, that was seen as a different market, a different, and maybe the developers of City Center had that in mind, maybe they didn't, but at that time, and in that interview, Wynn was really just referring to Bellagio and, I don't know, was the second property, was it just Wynn? And, I mean, Bellagio, of course, was so much a part of the DNA that those were the two that Wynn saw as the true luxury properties.
So what does Steve Wynn do in his design process and his creative process? And more importantly, what do the people working for Steve Wynn do in their process that's so much different from what these other people will do?
Let me take a shot at that first.
Sure.
Real short. He cares he doesn't think first about the money. He thinks first about the project, the sensation that his customers are going to get, and he knows if he does that, the money will follow.
Brilliantly put. I mean, the numbers come completely secondary. They are obviously important, and they do influence some of our decisions, but the entire basis of a project starts with the emotion. He describes a room. He describes, for an example, he'll say, I want to walk 3 steps down into a round room 50 feet in diameter with a 10-foot ceiling. He'll go to full depth about it with view beyond it and everything else, because all he cares about ultimately is the experience of being inside. Yeah, I think that the income is secondary to all that.
And hence the income's the biggest.
Come again?
And therefore the income is bigger. So,
Yeah, I mean, we are constantly taking efforts that make really kind of no sense from a financial or from a structural standpoint to kind of reconfigure our hotels to make sure that things are as accessible, as comfortable, as luxurious as possible. And even while we have them, I mean, Mr. Wynn lives in the hotel, so he sees things every single day. And we'll realize that there's a critical flaw with one corner, and that corner has to go. And that's it. I mean, we're learning from our own mistakes kind of as we go and growing. And every time we have a new project, I mean, I wasn't there for the beginnings of the Mirage and the Bellagio, but they constantly refer to other spaces and what was successful and what was flawed. I mean, we're growing from it.
So, my father worked for Steve for 15 years. Really, I might blow the house down. My father worked for Steve for 15 years. And one of the things that he said long after he was gone was that even with Steve's vision, which he does have impaired vision, that Steve had more vision and more feeling for what needed to go into a casino than anybody else, literally, that's ever lived. That he is the ultimate visionary.
The other thing is he didn't cut corners. He wants it the best. And when his brother was working for him, I would stand there and his brother, don't tell him about this idea because you'll want to do it and we can't afford it. Well, I didn't pay any attention to that because, Steve is the leader, and it's important to be the best, and that's the way he looks at it. We were working on, for example, he cares about his customer like nobody else that I know of. And we were working on the Siegfried and Roy's Secret Garden, which has animals and and enclosures. And he went out there and he says, "There's too much sun. I don't want my customers to be uncomfortable. So let's get some more shade," and that sort of thing. And it's not a big thing, but it's a big thing.
No, you're exactly right. And at the risk of sounding selfish, he really designs these casinos for himself. I mean, he wants to be comfortable there and basically puts himself in the position of every single guest in every single condition. That's how we think and how we design.
So as the CAS students are walking around the Strip this week, what kind of corners should they look for being cut? How are they going to tell the difference?
Would you repeat the question?
Yeah, what corners do other people cut that people would notice that they're out in the Strip?
I'm not sure that it matters.
Really?
Well, tomorrow when we go walking around, I'll point a few of them out. It's pretty obvious.
I don't think Steve cut corners. I can't remember any corners that he cut. I've been in his presence when we did the work at Bellagio, which had the big central greenhouse sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
We were opening in 2 days, and he didn't like the staircase, and he said, "Tear it out." Wow. They tore it out and built it again. And when we were working at the Mirage, he didn't like some of the trees inside. And he says, which are banyan trees, he said, "I'm going to write a song, Bye Bye Banyans." And I said, "Steve, you're going to cause a lot of problems." He said, "I don't care. Out." Well, it turns out that there was some artificial trees being made at that time. There were palm trees. They had, embalmed fronds. And there were essentially pipes with the petioles around them. And I said, well, you know, that's just a pipe. We can curve the pipes. And so we did it, and actually it turns out much better than what we'd envisioned. Steve had a knack for sensing what's going to work and what's not going to work. And, you know, I don't know how else to explain it.
He also, for all of he has an artistic classical training, but he asks for things that are not generally standard from, like, I studied classical architecture. He asks for things that really you wouldn't expect based on symmetries and things like that. And it's much more about just kind of well, what was I going to say? The kind of what I'm learning is that it's not about basic symmetries and about kind of what you'd expect to put in a garden, for instance, like Banyan Trees. He says, take something out and put something else in, and you have to find a quick solution, and suddenly you realize that what you're forced to put in there actually works just as well, if not better, as what was there before. And he just kind of, he forces, I think, the best out of designers.
You know, I've worked for him for 30 years as a consultant, and I've yet to have him tell me to do exactly this. He just says, fix it. And that puts it up to me and others to figure that out.
That seems to be a good tactic for a leader, to identify a problem and then let the experts fix it instead of micromanaging. Which kind of brings us to our next section. I want to talk about the casino itself. And this is something that Steve has said many times, something that's no secret to anybody, but the casinos pretty much all have the same stuff inside, don't they? The same games. What makes one casino different from another, and why do people choose to go to one casino instead of another?
Can I address that question?
Please.
Because he was talking about, he's doing a casino in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
He says, I got to figure out some reason for people want to fly over all of these other casinos across the Midwest and land at my joint. And so that's the task that he's facing. I got to make it better. I got to make it beautiful. I got to make them feel comfortable, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's the key to it. Doing it is not easy, but that's what he does. He demands.
I think we got to address a word that you guys used, best. There can only be one best. There's got to be a lot of other stuff. If you, as you walk around the strip tomorrow or the next day, most of the people you see cannot afford to go to the Wynn, the Bellagio, or the Encore. Yet they provide a huge portion of the economic benefit that Las Vegas has. Do you count, when you look at Las Vegas, Tommy Lardy over at Casino Royale, which from the outside is a pretty ordinary looking place, but it has the highest earning White Castle, it has the highest earning Denny's, it has the highest earning Outback Steakhouse. Those are serving needs. When you look at Las Vegas now, you not only have to count the restaurants, you have to count CVS as part of it. It's a huge part of the strip. It's amazing to look. I can't imagine anybody thinking 30 years ago that the pharmacies would occupy prime strip real estate. But the fact is that most of our visitors need that to be comfortable. People come to Las Vegas to escape where they are, to be someone else for a moment, or at least hope to. They're looking for that hero's journey, that chance to be something special. And it doesn't take much to play into it, but as you go out and look at this city, make sure that you don't just look at the best. Look at the rest.
And John, even the Walgreens is the highest grossing Walgreens in the country at Casino Royale. There's 55,000 people a day walk in front of this casino. And it is ordinary. Mr. Alardi knows it, and he understands his market.
Yep.
And that's what John's speaking to. We target different markets in town. We like talking about the grand and the glorious, but there's a lot more here than that.
So what does Mr. Alardi do right? Why is Casino Royale packed? Why does it generate so much revenue when other places that are pitched to the same segment don't?
stays within his scale, he looks for needs that haven't been filled. Where Tom has the advantage of not being a publicly traded company. And if you were to ask me what went wrong with Las Vegas, or what has hurt us the most, it's spread